When you reach the point of writing your quantitative research questions, you are not beginning something new. You are completing the logic you have already built. You began with a phenomenon, something observable happening in a real system. Inside that phenomenon you identified attention, the part that was misaligned or not understood. You traced the consequence of leaving that tension unresolved. Together, those layers allowed you to locate the gap, the specific missing knowledge the field still needs. Once that gap was clear, the methodology was no longer optional. Because the missing knowledge was numerical, you selected a quantitative methodology. Only after the methodology was set did you choose the quantitative design. Descriptive, correlational, causal-comparative, quasi-experimental, or experimental. The research questions come only after those decisions, because they must align with the methodology and the design you already named in your purpose statement. When writing quantitative research questions, the verb inside the question must match the design. The verb is not decorative. It is the signal that tells the reader exactly which statistical analysis you will run. It must be inside the question itself because the question is the sentence the statistical analysis must directly answer. If the verb is missing or incorrect, the design and analysis will not align. A descriptive study is used when the gap is simply that the field does not know what is present in a population or context. Descriptive questions summarize patterns such as levels, frequencies, or averages. They do not test relationships, predictions, associations, or differences. Because of this, descriptive questions never use verbs like relationship, predict, association, or statistically significant difference, because no inferential test is being conducted. If your phenomenon shows that districts are adopting digital tools, but no one has documented current student digital literacy, the gap is descriptive, the methodology is quantitative, and the design is descriptive. The purpose might read, the purpose of this descriptive study is to describe levels of digital literacy among 9th grade students in District X. The research question then becomes, what are the levels of digital literacy among 9th grade students in District X? No inferential verb appears because none belongs in a descriptive question. A correlational design is used when the gap is about how variables move together. This design includes correlation, regression, and chi-square as analysis tools, but the approach is still called correlational. When both variables are continuous and the question is whether they rise or fall together, the analysis is correlation and the verb must be relationship. Imagine a phenomenon where student engagement varies widely. The tension is that teachers believe their own self-efficacy may be connected to engagement, but it has never been measured. The consequence is that support decisions are being made without evidence. The gap is that the field does not know whether a measurable relationship exists. The methodology is quantitative and the design is correlational. The purpose might say, the purpose of this correlational study is to examine the relationship between teacher self-efficacy and student engagement in high school classrooms. The research question then becomes, what is the relationship between teacher self-efficacy and student engagement in high school classrooms? The word relationship inside the question aligns the study to a correlation analysis. A correlational design also includes situations where the gap is about prediction. Here, the analysis tool is regression, but the design name remains correlational. The research question must use the verb predict. Imagine a phenomenon where student grades fluctuate unpredictably. The tension is that teachers believe attendance plays a role, but the strength of that role has not been measured. The consequence is that attendance policies are being shaped without clear evidence. The gap is that the field does not know the extent to which attendance predicts academic performance. The methodology becomes quantitative, and the design is correlational. The purpose might say, the purpose of this correlational study is to determine the extent to which student attendance predicts academic performance in 9th grade students. The research question then becomes, to what extent does student attendance predict academic performance in 9th grade students? The verb predict must appear inside the question because the regression model must directly answer that verb. When both variables are categorical and the gap is about whether their categories tend to occur together, the correlational design uses chi-square as the analysis tool. Here, the verb must be association. Imagine a phenomenon where course completion rates appear uneven across in-person, hybrid, and online classes. The tension is that leaders suspect modality and completion may be connected, but no data exist. The consequence is that scheduling decisions are being made without understanding these patterns. The gap is that we do not yet know whether an association exists between modality and completion. The methodology becomes quantitative, the design remains correlational, and the purpose might say. The purpose of this correlational study is to determine whether an association exists between instructional modality and course completion rates in high school students. The research question then becomes, is there an association between instructional modality and course completion rates in high school students? The word association is required because the chi-square test must answer the question exactly as phrased. Causal-comparative, quasi-experimental, and experimental designs all test group differences, but with different levels of control. In a causal-comparative design, the groups already exist and you are comparing them after the fact. In a quasi-experimental design, you introduce an intervention but cannot randomly assign participants. In an experimental design, you introduce an intervention and randomly assign participants. While their internal validity differs, their research questions take the same form because all three designs compare mean scores. The verb must be statistically significant difference. Imagine a phenomenon where two instructional models are used across schools. The tension is that no one knows if they produce different achievement outcomes. The consequence is that districts are investing in models without evidence. The gap is that the field does not know whether a statistically significant difference exists between the outcomes of Model A and Model B. The methodology becomes quantitative. If schools already adopted these models on their own, the design is causal-comparative. The purpose might say, the purpose of this causal-comparative study is to determine whether there is a statistically significant difference in reading achievement between students taught with Model A and students taught with Model B. The research question becomes, is there a statistically significant difference in reading achievement between students taught with Model A and students taught with Model B? The verb statistically significant difference must appear because the analysis will test mean differences directly. Quantitative research questions must rely on variables that can be measured numerically. If a construct cannot be expressed numerically, it cannot appear in a quantitative question, unless it is later operationalized into a measurable form. Quantitative questions must also be phrased neutrally. You do not claim that one variable increases another, or that one group performs better, unless the design explicitly supports directional phrasing. Only regression and true experimental designs justify directional language. All other quantitative questions remain neutral. You also do not embed your expectations in the research question. Predictions and expectations belong in hypotheses, not in the question itself. You should avoid vague verbs like examine, explore, investigate, impact, or influence in quantitative questions because they could lead to multiple designs or analyses. A quantitative research question must include the verb that matches the design and the analysis. Relationship belongs to correlational studies using correlation. Predict belongs to correlational studies using regression. Association belongs to correlational studies using chi-square. Statistically significant difference belongs to causal-comparative, quasi-experimental, and experimental studies. If the verb does not align with the design, the question is broken. Each analysis receives its own research question. One analysis means one research question. Two analyses mean two research questions. You never combine multiple analyses into one question. Once the research question is aligned, it will tell you exactly what kind of data you must collect. A relationship question requires two continuous variables. A predict question requires a predictor and an outcome. A statistically significant difference question requires a group variable and a continuous outcome. An association question requires two categorical variables. Continuous variables, categorical variables, and group-based variables lead to different analyses, which is why your verb must match the type of variable you are studying. A quantitative research question is not creative writing. It is alignment. It is the final expression of your phenomenon, tension, consequence, gap, methodology, design, purpose, and variables. When your research question is aligned, your next steps, writing hypotheses and planning your data collection, become far more straightforward because the logic of your study is already clear.